Keep your eye open. Let's do a tier list.
Hey Toy fans, Rob here.
Let's get these guys out of the box and see what they're all about.
Hey Toy fans, Rob here, and I'm back with another tier video. I did a poll recently on Twitter and asked you guys which figure you'd like to see me do a tier video for. To be honest, I kind of thought Rogue would win, but no, Cyclops handily won the survey. So we are going to go ahead and do a tier list of 6-inch scale figures from Toy Biz and Hasbro. Now in this particular tier video, I want to go ahead and cover as many 6-inch Toy Biz and Hasbro Cyclops figures as I actually have in my collection. And I've got most of them. There's two major ones that are not going to be featured in this video. The first one is the all-new Cyclops from the Toys R Us exclusive box set that came out a number of years ago. Unfortunately, when that box set released, I was not at a point in my life where I could pick it up, and I've paid the price for it ever since. But I have owned enough Bucky Cap figures to tell you that if I had to rank that Cyclops figure, he probably wouldn't rank very high. Not only was he out of proportion for a teenage Cyclops, and I don't think we even had the teen body mold when that figure was made, but the paint applications on the rib cage for the figure, on the sides, and the black detail on the costume was never applied cleanly on any version of that figure that I've ever seen. So if I was going to give him a ranking, it'd probably be C or D tier. And let me go ahead and explain the tiers that we have going on here. All the way to the left, we have the S tier, the Summers tier. We've got the A tier, the B tier, the C tier, and over here on the right, the D tier. A little out of frame, but that's okay. Any figure that earns that position probably don't need to spend your time staring at for very long anyway. So as I said, I was missing out on the box set, the Toys R Us exclusive all-new X-Men box set with that Cyclops figure. The other one you guys are probably going to be waiting for that's not going to happen on this list is the VHS Cyclops figure. Now, the VHS Cyclops figure was a really cool idea in concept, but unfortunately, the execution of that figure wasn't the greatest. Nearly every figure I saw that people had in hand online had a misshapen visor. The visor, of all things, the most important detail on a Cyclops costume, and it was very consistently inconsistent. And unfortunately, with such bad quality control on that figure, I was just never very motivated to pick him up and add him to my collection. But with all of that said, what we have before us is one of the earliest 6-inch Cyclops figures that I have in my collection. This is what I'm calling the train station Cyclops figure from the first X-Men movie. He's got a light piping feature that if you have a light directly down on top of the figure, in fact, let me go ahead and get my phone light out here, you can actually shine a light in the head of the figure and it will make the eyes light up. You see how that works there? I'm going to pull the phone away, bring that back. That, kids, is what is called light piping. Many of us grew up with that before we had buttons on our figures that would activate via batteries. So, a fun feature for this figure to be sure, and of course it is representative of Cyclops in the train station from that first X-Men movie. But this figure's articulation is really bad. He's got single-jointed hips, single-jointed knees, the ankles don't move, single-jointed shoulders that just rotate all the way around. I mean, he is definitely a product of his time, coming straight out of the Toy Biz 90s figures where 5 points of articulation was considered the standard. They did change that moving into the new millennium, and this figure kind of suffers from the time and place that he released. If you're sentimental about the first X-Men movie like I tend to be, he might be fun to have in your collection. But really, for the most part, you don't need this guy. I'm going to stick him in D tier, and we are almost certainly, I hope, going to get a better James Marsden Cyclops figure when Avengers Doomsday comes out next year. Fingers crossed. Next up, we have X-Men Evolution Cyclops. This Cyclops figure was released in 2001 to coincide with the cartoon of the same name. I'm a big fan of X-Men Evolution. It hit me at the right time, and I thought it was a really fresh reinvigoration of the X-Men franchise after the 90s X-Men cartoon had done so much to raise the cultural awareness of the X-Men as a superhero team. This figure also suffers from absolutely terrible articulation, and he's got a dynamic foot that most of the time means he has trouble standing up. He's got 2 switches on the back. One activates his hand for blasting, the other one activates his leg for kicking. So that's how that figure works out. As much as I love X-Men Evolution, and I really, really do, this figure itself is also a bit rough. If you're a collector of the cartoon, this is your only Cyclops figure available until Hasbro decides to do a modern one, and please let that happen. But as it stands, the way he is right now, I'm gonna go ahead and have to put him in D tier as well. I'm sorry, Cyclops. Next, we're gonna get a little more recognizable with our Cyclops figures. We have the X-Men Classics Cyclops. I believe he was released in 2003. This Cyclops is part of the inaugural X-Men Classics line released by Toy Biz, a sister line of Marvel Legends at the time that focused exclusively on X-Men characters. And this was our 90s Jim Lee Cyclops. And boy, did he live up to the nickname Slim. This Cyclops originally came with an action base that allowed you to light up his visor. He does have holes in the back of the figure from where that would plug into the figure. I don't have that base anymore. But this is him. His head only rotates left and right. He's got tons of articulation, as Toy Biz loved to do. Finger articulation even, toe articulation, all kinds of articulation and super knobby hips. For a time, this was a really cool Cyclops figure to get. For a time. But eventually we did get a better version of the 90s costume design. And this figure hasn't aged terribly well. He's really one you just don't need in your collection anymore at this point. And despite the great head sculpt and the paint shading on the figure that I do appreciate that Toy Biz used to give us, I'm going to go ahead and put this figure in D tier. We just have too many better options at this point. Sorry, Cyclops. Next we have the first proper Cyclops figure in the Marvel Legends line. We have, from the Sentinel wave, the 70s John Byrne, Dave Cockrum Cyclops. Of course, he wore this costume into the 80s. This Cyclops figure was a reuse of the Namor figure from Series 2. They just gave him a new head and gloves and boots. And he's not slim. He's actually a little bit beefy for a Cyclops figure, if you ask me. I will argue that this figure has a bit more practical articulation worked into him, but because of the age of the figure, his joints just don't hold up like they used to. There we go. We got some wobbly arms there. This one just doesn't stay up at all. Well, hardly at all. And the visor is really huge on this figure. It almost looks like a virtual reality eyepiece versus just being a flush visor on the actual head of the figure. This is another example of a costume design that we've received better versions of over the years. So once again, and this is starting to be a real downer, I think I have to put this Cyclops figure in D tier. I promise things will eventually get better for you, buddy, but not yet. The next Cyclops we're going to take a look at is this Cyclops from the Brood Wave. This is the first Astonishing Cyclops figure that we received. This Cyclops figure is gimmick-free, and he's actually a bit more trim than the last Cyclops figure we received, who was a bit too beefy to be a Cyclops. Paint-wise, though, everything's pretty clean on him. It is interesting to see on the back how they interpreted the Astonishing X-Men line work on the costume. I guess Hasbro kind of made that up. I don't think he was drawn that way ever in Astonishing X-Men, the comic book. But if you were after an Astonishing Cyclops figure in the early to mid-2000s, this was your option. I will say, I think he holds up a bit better than some of the other candidates we've looked at. And while we've definitely received a better Astonishing Cyclops since then, I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in C tier. I don't think he's the worst. Actually, scratch that. We're putting him in D tier. We've come a long way. A long, long way for Cyclops figures. All right, next up, we have the Astonishing 2.0 Cyclops figure. That's not an official name, but that's the name that I use. This Cyclops figure is based on the costume design work of Simone Bianchi, and this is Cyclops when the X-Men moved to San Francisco during the Utopia era of the comics. You'll notice he does differ from the standard Astonishing Cyclops design, as he's got some gold banding on his shins and on his forearms, and there's a bit more piping on the costume. He's also got an X logo on his chest, and it looks like this is the first Cyclops we received on the Bucky cap mold, which would be, or at least the first I have in my collection, which would be a mold that they go to often for Cyclops for the next several years. Though when most people talk about Astonishing X-Men, they're not talking about the San Francisco suit. They're talking about a different suit that we're definitely still going to see on this list. I'm going to go ahead and give this Cyclops a B rating. There's a few other Marvel Legends out there to match this era of costume, and despite being the Bucky cap, I just kind of like how he looks aesthetically. Next we have the Marvel Now Cyclops figure. This was almost Tron-inspired, I guess you could say. A big departure for Cyclops at the time with the X on the face and the red line work on the costume. Very unique, very edgy as far as the leader of mutant rebellions go. This figure was exclusive to Toys R Us and extremely hard to come by, but mine happens to have a loose head. You see this here as I try to pose his head back? It just falls every single time. I'm not sure if that was an issue across every figure, but it was definitely an issue for my Cyclops figure. And I would argue that unless you're a completionist, like I tend to be, this is not a quintessential Cyclops costume design at this point in history. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this guy in C tier. Next we have a figure that a lot of people were waiting for when it came out. A 90s era Cyclops figure, part of the Warlock wave. This was a refreshing Cyclops to receive in the line. The first time that Hasbro actually tackled doing the 90s era Jim Lee style costume. And I think for the time, they did a pretty good job. I like that he's got more gold on the visor, and then that they've done some paint detail on the belt here with the buckles on the chest and on the waist. The color palette for this figure does seem to be more orangish yellow and blue versus just being yellow and blue. And a lot of the X-Men that came out around the same time, a lot of the X-Men Marvel Legends figure also had that orangish coloring. I didn't mind it. It was a style choice. But I do understand if people were a little let down by not going for a more classic, bright yellow color scheme. I think the biggest flaw of this figure at this point, aside from being on what is now considered a dated Bucky cap buck, are these belts on the boots and on the legs. For whatever reason, Hasbro didn't want to mold those onto the leg permanently. And at least he's holding up right now, but these belts tended to fall a lot when you posed the figure around. So that was a bit of a hindrance to the enjoyment of this figure. And it was definitely a problem for me on a later version of this costume design. And at this point in the Marvel Legends line, Hasbro was starting to hit their stride with Marvel Legend figure design. So I don't think it's unreasonable to have hoped for additional hands or an additional head with a blast effect. Factoring all of that in, I think this guy's earned a spot in the B tier ranking. Too harsh? We'll keep going. The next Cyclops figure I have is one that was wanted for a very, very long time, even after he came out. This is the Cyclops from the Toys R Us exclusive Dark Phoenix 2-pack. He's got some great paint shading, something that Hasbro really doesn't do on their figures anymore. And was this the last one? Let me know in the comments below. I can't think of another figure after the release of this Cyclops that was so lovingly paint shaded the way that this figure has been. Maybe the 80th anniversary Hulk, but the options are few and far between. This Cyclops figure also didn't come with any extra hands or any extra heads. I do like the way that they've done the visor on this figure though. If you're one of the lucky ones who was actually able to find this at a Toys R Us back in the day, this is still a good Cyclops figure to keep in your collection. Despite being on the Bucky cap, I think it's the proper proportions for how Cyclops was drawn during this era of comics, and I actually like it quite a bit. I almost want to put him in A tier, almost, but the figure is starting to show his age a little bit, so I'm going to put him on the farthest edge of B tier that we possibly can. Next up, we have a bit of a fan vote Cyclops figure. I say that jokingly, but this is a Cyclops figure that definitely wouldn't have existed without people like Punker Mike out there in the community designing this figure for Hasbro so that they could just go and copy the recipe. This is, of course, Bomber Jacket Cyclops from the Love Triangle 3-pack, and they did a decent enough job of reusing Wolverine's jacket from a Logan figure and putting it on this Cyclops figure. I like that he's got X logos on the shoulders. He is wearing the jacket over the standard bandolier that Cyclops has on his costume. And this figure is actually worse with the belts than the last 90s Cyclops we looked at. All the time are these falling on my particular copy of the figure. Definitely wish they would have molded those on and done that differently. But to his credit, this Cyclops did come with some interchangeable heads. We got some Scott Summers heads here, which look really, really nice. I'm glad we got those. The only time we ever got civilian Cyclops heads with any Cyclops figure. And overall, I feel like this was a figure that was definitely designed with the fan in mind. Despite the problem with the leg straps, I think I want to go ahead and make this our first A-tier Cyclops figure, but I'm going to put him really close on B. He's going to have 1 foot in B. Am I allowed to do that? It's my list, right? He's definitely a Cyclops design that I wouldn't mind Hasbro revisiting at some point in the future. After the Love Triangle Cyclops, we have the retro-carded X-Factor Cyclops. This was a really fun figure, and the first time we finally got a blast effect included with our Cyclops. We've got this head that has a removable blast piece. Just plugs right back into the head. And it's got some great grimacing expression on there. This was a really fun Cyclops figure to get on a retro card. Unfortunately, it's a Cyclops that is yet to have a full team of matching teammates to go along with him, and I'm not sure we're going to get them at this point. Hasbro is so slow at rolling out full teams and full costume designs. But if you're a fan of X-Factor and a fan of Cyclops, this is a classic costume design to be sure. And actually the second time we've received this costume design in the life of the Marvel Legends line. Toy Biz gave it an effort many years ago with that Sentinel Wave Cyclops figure. I don't know that the execution really worked. That X striping design was way too thin on the figure. Hasbro at least got it right, so I gotta give him credit for that. But as we are struggling to come up with an entire team of matching X-Factor characters for this Cyclops figure, despite the alternate head in effect, I'm going to say that this guy, for now, belongs in B tier. You don't have to have him for your collection. And there are other X-Factor Cyclops options out there that we'll get to on this video. Next up, we have Age of Apocalypse Cyclops. This is a really dramatic character design, fun in concept, both in design and the story he comes from. Unfortunately, I think Hasbro fell a little bit short when designing this figure. And there's plenty of comic book reference out there to show you that this Cyclops did wear boots and had black gloves and other costume details that Hasbro just chose to omit on this figure. Probably a cut cost, but that leaves us with a somewhat incomplete Age of Apocalypse Cyclops figure, don't you think? Generally speaking, I like the Age of Apocalypse designs, but this one leaves you just a little bit wanting. I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in C tier. Alright, next we're going to go a little more modern with our Cyclops figure, and we're going to bring in the House of X Powers of 10 Cyclops. Seemingly taking some inspiration costume design-wise from the Marvel Now Cyclops we have over here in C tier, except doing it in blue. A decently unique take on Cyclops costume design from the modern times. He's got some extra bits on the wrist. He does have a newly sculpted belt. And just like we saw with the X-Factor Cyclops, we got an alternate blasting head for this House of X Powers of X Cyclops figure. A very nice inclusion, glad we have that. This would be the final Cyclops figure we received on the Bucky Cap mold. But I gotta say, the costume isn't that iconic. Maybe in 10 years we'll decide it is. As of right now, if you could only pick one Cyclops for your collection, it's probably not going to be this guy. So even with the cool effect and the newly sculpted pieces, I think I'm going to put this guy in C tier. Man, this tier list is really starting to make me feel a bit unkind. But that's okay. We got 4 more Cyclops figures to go, and I think we're in good shape. The next figure we've got is the most current version of the Astonishing Cyclops costume. Completely sculpted from the ground up, or very nearly, for this figure alone. This is a great looking Cyclops figure. I like the way that they've done gold paints for the accented details on the costume. I like that he's got the sort of smoke effect, I guess, coming off of his visor, having just fired an optic blast. And when we compare this Astonishing Cyclops to what we got all the way back in the Brood Wave, you can see that Hasbro has really come a long way and definitely figured out proportioning and costume design, articulation, and hiding that articulation in the design of the figure. This is a really nice Cyclops figure. While I do wish he would have had his own blast effects and a Scott Summers head, and I know I'm being really picky, I am so pleased with the way that this figure turned out. I think I'm actually going to make him S tier, Summers tier. How about that? Next up, we're going back to classic blue and yellow. We have the X-Men 97 Cyclops figure. This Cyclops figure also came with a blasting head, which was a nice touch. We have 2 heads for this figure, one that's kind of smirking, and one that's a little more grimacing. This is a revisit of the 90s costume that we've seen a couple of times before, but the face is admittedly a bit cartoony. I know they were trying to match concept art, and if they were making the figure now, they probably wouldn't lean so hard into the cartoonish looking face, especially with the way Cyclops is depicted on that show. He looks very happy-go-lucky in the face here, and that was not how the character was really portrayed on the cartoon at the end of the day. It still has great articulation, it's still a classic costume, but I do think the head sculpt sets it back a bit. I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in B tier. I think Hasbro can do better, and we're just waiting for it. Next, we have a return to X-Factor. This Cyclops just came out in 2025, part of the Nemesis wave, and it is a really good rendition of X-Factor Cyclops. I'm very happy with it. And we got our brand new blast effect that is now coming with these Cyclops figures, with this wider beam and this sort of impact effect, so you can actually like push it up against a figure if you're posing. Very cool, very nice Cyclops. We got extra hands with the figure. Call me greedy. It would have been really nice to just have an unmasked Scott Summers head. And it would be nice if the only other member of the team actually had boots painted on her costume to match the way the costume's supposed to look. We're still waiting for Hasbro to figure out that make good for us. But if we're just taking this Cyclops on his own with the accessories he came with, I am a big fan. And I think this guy's going in A tier. Now for the final Cyclops figure we're going to look at today, and one that I've only had for about a week or so. We've got this brand new John Byrne, Dave Cockrum era Cyclops figure straight from the finale of X-Men 97. But of course, if you read comics, you recognize this as the main costume Cyclops wore for at least 20 years or more in the comics throughout the 70s and the 80s, even dipping back into the 60s. I like this Cyclops figure a lot, I really do, and it gave us another blasting head with an impact effect, only this one has a little bit of a cartoon animation paint on top of the blasting line, which I think actually helps it a little bit as far as making it look more, I don't know, comic book inspired even. This figure is on the same body as the X Factor Cyclops that we already looked at that was really nice. And he also came with extra hands. If I could be super nitpicky, I do wish he had a little bit of the shading that this Toys R Us exclusive Dark Phoenix Cyclops figure came with. And if you look at this costume in the comics, nearly every time you see it drawn, there is always very heavy shading and blue highlighting on that costume. I just wish we could have gotten it on this figure. Maybe Hasbro is still planning on doing that? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But as he stands in the version of the figure we have right now, I like him a lot, but I think he falls just short of being an S tier, Summers tier. So I'm putting him in A tier. And that's it, toy fans. We've done another tier list. We have a single S tier figure this time with Astonishing Cyclops, and then the other costume design split pretty evenly amongst the rankings. What do you think, toy fans? Did we nail it this time? Or would you have ranked things a little bit differently? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys like what you saw here, please go ahead and give this video a like and share it with your friends. And on videos like these, I really appreciate hearing from you about how you would have ranked things differently. So let's get that conversation going. You guys can always keep up with me at D21Beast, and I'll see you guys next time.